we can create sound, and now we make these sounds as a gift and as our offering to you. Amen. And now, would you welcome the Southern University Wind Symphony and their conductor, Ken, with applause.
Thank you very much for coming out this afternoon. We'd like to obey Paul's injunction in Ephesians 5 to speak to each other with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs in our program today. Nearly everything finds its musical base in great hymns of the church, and those that don't have a strong spiritual component. And so we hope this program will be enjoyable as well as a blessing to you. Our opening number, the Spirit of the Ages Fanfare, is based on the hymn, O God, Our Help in Ages Past. The composer, Brant Carrick, teaches at Northern Kentucky University, not too far from here, and says that the piece is dedicated to his parents. His father was a choir director and his mother was a church organist, and he grew up listening to her practice, as did I. Hi, Mom. And she's watching via internet from Oregon. So this is dedicated to Brant Carrick's parents and also to my parents, too, because they instilled in me a great love for music and my mom a great love of organ. Our next work requires a bit of background. This goes back to the earliest collection of biblical songs that we have, far earlier than any hymnal, and that is the Book of Psalms. The Book of Psalms served as the inspiration for church music throughout history, and in particular in the Renaissance period, the Reformation period, many branches of Protestantism felt that you should only sing words of Scripture. And so there are many settings of psalms that came to be known as psalmody. This piece is based on Psalm number 2, which is an interesting psalm. One of the things that's so interesting to me about the book of Psalms is the honesty that is there. David doesn't try to pretty up his language. If he is angry about something, he lets God know it. And that's what's happening here in Psalm 2. I'd like to read this to you. Why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, on my holy hill. I will proclaim the degree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss his son, lest he be angry and you be destroyed in your way. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. So it's not the meek and mild, gentle baby Jesus here. This is some pretty tough stuff. You've got some unruly characters, and God is willing to play rough with them to get them to fall into line. You may have picked up on some references here if you know the work Messiah by Handel very well. Thou shalt dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Why do the nations rage so furiously together? Handel drew on this psalm for inspiration for those great arias. In England during the Renaissance period, the composer Thomas Tallis wrote a wonderful choral setting of this psalm. And 300 years later, the American composer Fisher Tull took that psalm setting by Tallis and used it as the basis for this work, a set of sketches on a Tudor, referring to Tudor England, psalm written by Thomas Tallis. After an introduction, you'll hear the psalm played by solo alto saxophone, gradually expanding to woodwinds and then full ensemble. And then we'll follow a series of sketches or variations on the psalm. The psalm setting by Tallis is rhythmically uneven. He can't make up his mind if it's in 3 or 4, or sometimes it's in 5. And so Tull's music is similarly rhythmically unstable and very challenging to play. But you'll hear throughout the almost violent character of this psalm. This is about warfare. This is rough stuff. And Tull captured that beautifully in this psalm. So this is Sketches on a Tudor Psalm. As a teacher, I've noticed a phenomenon that I think a lot of you can probably attest to being true here too. Young children don't know hymns like I knew hymns when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade. Children coming into academy don't know them. And oftentimes young adults coming into college don't know hymns like we did, speaking to those of us of my age or older. And partially to remedy that paucity of knowledge of hymns, the composer Duane Milburn, I keep calling him Dwight, Duane Milburn wrote this next suite. Milburn is an officer in the Army. He's actually an assistant conductor of the U.S. Army Band, Pershing Zone in Washington, D.C. But comes from a very strong Christian background, raised in Georgia. And he felt that people, religious or not religious, were really increasingly unaware of the great musical treasure that it lies between the covers of our hymnals. It increasingly is going unused on Sabbath or in many cases Sunday mornings. And so Milburn set 4 of his favorite hymns in very creative ways for symphonic wind ensemble. And so we're going to play Milburn's suite now. The first hymn, Wondrous Love, is an old shape note hymn from the South, so it has particular resonance for those of us from Southern, set in a very creative way. It begins with the hymn melody being played by the euphoniums and answered by various woodwind configurations, gradually building in intensity, then moves to a very fast setting with lots of rhythmic activity going on underneath with the melody and slow notes with other rhythmic things on top, building to a very majestic conclusion. The second movement is a ballad, a slow movement on the wonderful hymn, There is a Balm in Gilead to Heal the Sin-Sick Soul. And some gorgeous harmonies constructed here by Milburn for this hymn. The third movement is a scherzo, a very fast dance-like movement. Scherzo, of course, is a dance that always has sort of a humorous aspect to it. And he sets the hymn tune Nettleton, which we know as Come, Thou Fount of Every Blessing. And he switches up the rhythm scheme frequently to keep you on your toes, and it's just a ball to play. We love doing it. The final movement, the March on Wilson. Wilson is the hymn tune which we know by the text, When We All Get to Heaven. And he sets it in the style of a John Philip Sousa march, and is a great deal of fun, and concludes with a little duet between the lowest note of the lowest voice of the ensemble, the tuba, and the highest voice of the ensemble, the piccolo. And so I hope you enjoy, as much as we've enjoyed working on this suite of American hymn songs by Duane Milburn. One of the euphonium players who just stood should be a familiar face to several of you. Matt Webster is a freshman who has joined our ensemble and has done a great job. I'd like for Matt to stand along with other students who are not only members of the Kettering church family here, but who are graduates of Spring Valley Academy. In addition to those who have graduated, we have temporarily co-opted a SVA junior, Mr. Sam Pomalis, playing tuba, who has played with us before, and we just love having Sam so much. I told him I feel like he's a member who can't play with us very often, and it's great to have Sam with us once again. One other gentleman who did not get to stand as he was making his way to the choir loft is Michael Babianco, who's also an SVA grad, a sophomore, and an indispensable player in the Wind Symphony. So, Michael. This next piece is the newest piece on the program. As you can tell by the dates of the compositions, most of them are composed within the last 30, 40 years or so. This one is brand new, composed by an up-and-coming composer that I think you'll be hearing more from in future years. Michael Pichette is our principal trumpet player and is a first-year senior, music education major. He's got another year to go, but we call him a first-year senior, who has a real gift for composition. This piece, the Fanfare and Processional, is a piece that Michael wrote for his sister Lisa's, his twin sister Lisa's, wedding this past summer. And it turned out so well, we decided to feature it on this program, accompanied by Jerry Taylor at the organ. Also at this time, there will be ushers that will be coming through and give you an opportunity to help defray the cost of our venture. You have been incredibly generous to us during our stay here, from the meal that you provided for us at the hospital cafeteria last night, to taking us home and treating us so well last night and this morning, to the delicious lunch we had, to the sack suppers you're again providing, we just thank you so much. And so this offering doesn't only go to us, it goes to replenish the coffers of the music department here for funding us and treating us so very well. So the ushers will come forward while the brass and the organ play Pichette's Fanfare and Processional. Eric Ewazen is a very well-known composer of music for instrumental ensembles. He has an incredibly lyrical sense about him, and whether he's writing a concerto for trumpet or tuba, it's always very moving music. Ewazen teaches at the Juilliard School of Music in New York City. And 10 years ago and a couple of months beyond that, he was hard at work teaching his theory class at 8 o'clock in the morning when somebody rushed into his classroom and told him that an airliner had crashed into the World Trade Center, which isn't that far away. And of course, like all of us, we didn't believe it when we first heard it. But being there in New York City, there was no way to deny it. And he went through the various stages of loss and grief as many people around the world, and specifically in New York City, went through. This next piece is Iwezin's response. It is one of the most heartbreaking pieces I've ever heard, and captures that complete feeling of loss that we all felt. Those of us who had friends, my wife had a good friend who was working in the Trade Center and of course perished in that disaster. And many of you, I'm sure, have friends or acquaintances who are deeply traumatized, if not killed by that event. And this is one of those pieces that I think David would have set so eloquently in the Psalms, a cry of agony, a cry of existential angst. How can there be a God when stuff like this happens? And David would have felt fine expressing that to God. God, how can you even exist? And that's a feeling we all go through, and you'll hear that in this music. You'll hear glimmers of hope, but not much. And so this is sort of the low emotional point of the concert, but it expresses so well, states what we've all been through. We all have those valleys. But as David also said in a psalm, 21 psalms later, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And it's God's grace, God's amazing grace, that sees us through times like that. And so meditate on that in ways that God's grace has seen you through times like that as we play for you this well-known hymn that needs no introduction, Amazing Grace. As I mentioned at the beginning, my mother for many, many years has been a church organist. Unfortunately, in her church for the last 10 years or so, they've opted to go in favor of a celebration-style music in exclusion of the organ. And I have nothing against modern forms of music. As you can hear, we play very new music, and that's great. But to arbitrarily say, we're done with the old, we're not going to do that, I think is to lose touch with our heritage. And having grown up as the son of an organist, I've developed a deep love of organ music, particularly brass and organ, band and organ, and I'm always looking for great pieces that feature the organ. Somewhat serendipitously, I came across this piece last year while researching a composer whose work we were doing on a concert last spring. And I saw on his list of works on his website this piece titled Exaltation for wind symphony and organ, and I was immediately intrigued. So I emailed him and asked him for more information. He said it was a brand new piece that had been commissioned by the Dallas Wind Symphony, one of the premier wind organizations in the country, to be played at a large United Methodist church in Dallas. Interestingly, John Gibson, the composer, teaches at Southern Methodist University, while I teach at Southern Adventist University. So the Method and the Advent were the only thing keeping us apart, I guess. But I emailed him and he wrote back and told me about it, and he said it was based on 5 different hymn tunes, most predominantly All Creatures of Our God and King, but featuring extensively Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence, Come Thou Almighty King, and snippets of others that are tucked away in there. He said it's essentially an organ concerto, and that was really interesting to me. So I had him send me the parts and the score, which he sold me for a very reasonable price, and we set to work. And I immediately thought at that point, this would be great to take to Kettering and do with Jerry Taylor. And so that's basically why we are here, because I happened on John Gibson's website last spring. And so it's interesting the way that God leads things. But we have had just a tremendous trip, a tremendous tour, and a great stay here. And again, I thank you so much for your hospitality. So we're going to finish with this concerto for organ and winds entitled Exaltation. A number of familiar things, but listen carefully for some old chestnuts that are buried inside this piece.